iostudy.net.
Hello, this is Danielle, and today we're going to learn about quite and rather in English grammar. And as you can see here, we have a mind map in which we talk about the ideas for quite and rather. So let's first start off with talking about quite. When do we use quite? Well, we use quite when it is less than very, but more than a little. Quite also goes before a and used as completely when it goes with some adjectives, such as sure, different, true, etc. So let's first begin with the first idea. Quite is less than very, but more than a little. For example, it's quite cold. You'd better wear a coat. And Lucy lives quite near me, so we see each other quite often. So as you can see in both of these examples, we use quite as less than very, but more than a little. Next, quite goes before a or an. For example, it's quite a nice day, and that's quite an old house. Next, we use quite as meaning completely when goes with some adjectives such as sure, different, true, etc. So let's see some examples here. Number 1, she was quite different from what I expected. And number 2, everything they said was quite true. Okay, so as you can see, both of those times we use quite to mean completely when used with some adjectives. So there's your mind map for quite. Now let's move on to going to rather. Rather is used mainly with negative words and ideas. We also use rather with positive words, meaning usually or surprisingly. And rather can go before or after a or an. So let's take a look at some examples. We use rather mainly with negative words and ideas. For example, it's rather cold. You'd better wear your coat. And let's get a taxi. It's rather a long way to walk. So as you can see in both of these examples, we use rather mainly with negative words and ideas. Next, let's move on. We use rather with positive words, meaning usually or surprisingly. For example, these oranges are rather nice. Where did you get them? And Anne didn't like the book, but I thought it was rather interesting. So as you can see here, we use it with positive words, meaning usually or surprisingly. Finally, rather can go before or after a or an. So for example, a rather interesting film, and rather an interesting book. So as you see in these examples, rather can go before or after a or an. So here you have your completed mind map for quite and rather. You can go back to this at any time to refer to. Now click here for the outline. So here you have your outline for quite and rather. So here you have further explanations of how to use quite and rather in a sentence. You also have example sentences to look at for quite and rather. So you can scroll through this and read it, and after you're done reading it, you can click here to take the test. And in the next video, we're going to take the test on quite and rather. So thank you very much for joining me in this video where we saw the mind map and the outline for quite and rather in English grammar. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.